The morning sun rose over Seattle like any other day. Jake Morrison sat in his small apartment on Mars Colony, watching the live feed from Earth on his video screen. His mother was making breakfast in their kitchen back home, and his younger sister was complaining about her college classes. Everything was normal. Everything was peaceful. Then the sky turned red. Jake watched in horror as the feed cut to static. He tried calling back, but nothing worked. All communication channels went dead. Within seconds, emergency alarms blared throughout the Mars military base. Jake ran to the briefing room where dozens of other pilots were gathering, all of them asking the same question. What was happening? The answer came quickly and terribly. Earth was under attack. Lieutenant Morrison stood frozen as the commander displayed whatever footage they could receive. Massive alien warships, each one the size of a city, had appeared in Earth's orbit without warning. They were dark and angular, covered in weapons that glowed with an evil purple light. The ships belonged to a species humanity had never encountered before. The Krevthar Dominion had come to Sol System, and they had come for blood. The orbital defense platforms that protected Earth fired everything they had. Missiles, railguns, and laser batteries all opened up on the alien fleet. For a moment, Jake felt hope. Humanity had built those defenses over decades. They were supposed to be unbreakable. They lasted 17 minutes. The Krevthar weapons tore through Earth's defenses like paper. Each alien vessel fired beams of superheated plasma that melted steel and flesh alike. The defense platforms exploded one after another, turning into debris that rained down on the planet below. Then the bombardment of Earth itself began. New York disappeared first. The plasma beams struck Manhattan and kept firing for 30 seconds. When they stopped, nothing remained but a crater of molten rock that glowed red in the darkness. Tokyo vanished next, then London, then Mumbai. The aliens were systematic and merciless. They targeted every major city, every population center, every place where humans gathered in large numbers. Jake couldn't breathe. He tried to call home again, knowing it was useless. Seattle would be hit soon. His mother, his sister, everyone he loved was down there with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. The video feed showed people running through streets as the sky burned above them. Children screamed for their parents. Buildings collapsed. Entire neighborhoods were vaporized in seconds. On Europa Station, Dr. Helen Carter watched the same terrible broadcasts. She was a xenobiologist, someone who studied alien life forms. She had spent her career believing that contact with other species would bring wisdom and peace to the galaxy. She had been wrong. The research station's crew gathered in the observation deck, watching Earth die from nearly 800 million kilometers away. Why? Someone whispered. Why are they doing this? Helen had no answer. The Krevthar had sent no warning, no demands, no communication at all. They had simply arrived and started killing. Intelligence reports that came through on military channels suggested the aliens had been watching humanity for months, studying them, learning their weaknesses. This was not a random attack. This was extermination. Commander Paul Griffin was aboard the Earth defense ship Valiant when the attack began. His vessel was a patrol cruiser, lightly armed and designed for protecting trade routes from pirates. It was never meant to fight a war. When the Krevthar fleet arrived, Griffin made the hardest decision of his life. He ordered his crew to run. The Valiant fled at maximum speed while dozens of other Earth ships tried to fight. Griffin watched on his sensors as those brave vessels were obliterated. The alien warships had weapons that could track targets across millions of kilometers. They had shields that absorbed anything humanity threw at them. The few torpedoes that actually struck enemy vessels barely scratched their armor. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," his communications officer said. "It's from Earth Defense Command." Griffin listened to the message. It was Admiral Frank Bennett, broadcasting from the emergency bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains. The Admiral's voice was steady but filled with barely controlled rage. He ordered all surviving military vessels to retreat to Mars and the outer colonies. There would be no glorious last stand. Humanity needed its remaining ships alive if there was any hope of survival. The bombardment continued for 7 days. The Krevthar fleet moved across Earth's surface like locusts, destroying everything. They hit military bases first, then infrastructure, then anything that could support human civilization. Power plants exploded, dams burst, roads melted. The aliens used different weapons for different targets. Some cities were burned with plasma, others were hit with kinetic projectiles that struck with the force of nuclear weapons. A few were simply glassed over, turned into smooth sheets of fused rock that would remain sterile for centuries. By the end of the first week, Earth was dying. The atmosphere was choked with ash and smoke. The oceans boiled in places where the bombardment had been heaviest. 3 billion people were dead. Another billion were injured, dying, or trapped in the ruins with no hope of rescue. The Krevthar had not landed a single soldier. They had not needed to. Jake Morrison finally received confirmation on day 8. Seattle was gone. The entire Pacific Northwest had been hit with sustained plasma fire. Nothing survived. His family was dead. His home was ashes. He sat in his quarters on Mars and felt something break inside him. The grief was overwhelming, crushing, absolute. But beneath the grief, something else grew. Something cold and hard and hungry. Rage. On day 9, the Krevthar finally sent a message. It was broadcast on all frequencies in perfect English. A hologram appeared showing a Krevthar commander. The alien was tall and insectoid with 4 arms and a head that looked like a mantis. Its eyes were black and reflected no light. When it spoke, its voice was translated by machines into something humans could understand. People of Earth, it said, your civilization has been judged and found wanting. You are weak. You waste resources on art and philosophy when you should build weapons. You negotiate when you should conquer. You are a disgrace to intelligent life. The alien paused as if savoring the moment. We offer you one chance. Submit to the Krevthar Dominion. Your survivors will serve us as workers and slaves. Your technology will be absorbed. Your culture will be erased. You will be useful, if nothing else. Refuse, and we will finish what we have started. In 3 days, we will begin exterminating your colonies. You will watch everyone you love die slowly, until nothing remains but memories and regret. The message ended. Across the solar system, the surviving humans heard those words and understood what they faced. This was not a war for territory or resources. This was genocide. The Krevthar wanted to erase humanity from existence, to prove that the weak had no place in the galaxy. Admiral Bennett called an emergency council on Mars. Every surviving leader, military officer, and government official who could make it to the Red Planet gathered in a hastily built command center. The meeting was short. Some argued for surrender. They said humanity needed time to recover, to rebuild, to survive in any form possible. Others demanded immediate counterattack even though everyone knew it would be suicide. Jake Morrison was not at that meeting, but he heard about it later. Admiral Bennett listened to every opinion, considered every option, and then made his decision. He ordered the communications officer to open a channel to the Krevthar fleet. The aliens responded immediately, expecting humanity's surrender. Instead, they got something else. Admiral Frank Bennett appeared on screen. He was an old man, gray-haired and weathered by decades of military service. But his eyes were young with fury. He looked directly at the Krevthar commander and spoke words that would echo across the galaxy. You asked for our surrender, Bennett said quietly. You called us weak. You murdered 3 billion of our people to prove your strength. You made a mistake. The admiral leaned forward. Humanity has existed for millions of years. We survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly destroyed us. We climbed out of caves and reached the stars. We did it by being clever, by being stubborn, and by never ever giving up. You think you've broken us? You think we'll bow down and accept slavery? Bennett's voice grew colder. You're wrong. You wanted war. You wanted to see what humans become when we're pushed to the edge. Now you're going to find out. We're not going to surrender. We're not going to negotiate. We're going to take back our world, and then we're going to hunt you across the galaxy. Every ship you have will burn. Every world you've conquered will be freed. And when we're done, the Krevthar Dominion will be nothing. But a warning to other species. The Admiral stood up. You wanted to see us at our worst. Congratulations. You're about to witness what humanity becomes when you take everything from us. We're going to show you that weakness and mercy are choices we make, not limitations of our nature. And we're not feeling merciful anymore. Bennett ended the transmission. The Krevthar commander tried to respond, to mock the Admiral's defiance, but no one was listening anymore. Across Mars and the outer colonies, the surviving humans heard Bennett's words and understood. There would be no surrender. There, 3 months after Earth fell, Mars had transformed into something unrecognizable. The Red Planet's colonies had always been peaceful places where scientists and families lived simple lives under protective domes. Now those domes sheltered weapons factories that ran 24 hours a day, The sky glowed orange from the heat of foundries that never stopped working. Every person who could hold a tool was building something designed to kill. Jake Morrison stood in the hangar bay looking at his new fighter. The craft was nothing like the old patrol ships he had flown before the war. This machine was sharp and aggressive, covered in black armor that absorbed sensor scans. The weapons were massive, taking up nearly half the ship's mass. It had been designed by people who no longer cared about fuel efficiency or comfort, or anything except maximum destruction. They called it the Reaper. "Beautiful, isn't she?" a voice said behind him. Jake turned to see Marcus Cole, the chief weapons designer. Cole was a thin man in his 50s who never slept anymore. His eyes were constantly red and tired. He had lost both his children when the Krevthar burned Sydney. Since then, he had designed 17 new weapons systems, each one more terrible than the last. "It's a killing machine," Jake said. "That's the point," Cole replied. He walked up to the fighter and patted its hull like a proud father. "This ship has graviton disruptors that can tear apart enemy vessels at the molecular level. It has plasma torpedoes that burn at 50,000 degrees. It has quantum-entangled mines that can track targets across light years, and it's fast enough to strike before the enemy knows you're there." Jake climbed into the cockpit. Everything was stripped down to essentials. No comfortable seat, no entertainment system, no personal storage. Just weapons controls and navigation systems. The fighter was built for one purpose, and it was very good at that purpose. "How many can you build?" Jake asked. "We're producing 200 a day," Cole said. "Every colony in the system is building them. By next month, we'll have 15,000 Reapers ready for deployment." Jake did the math in his head. That was 15,000 pilots. 15,000 people who would fly these machines into combat, knowing most of them would never come home. He thought about his family, about Seattle, about the 3 billion dead. Then he nodded. "Good," he said. "It's not enough, but it's a start." At Mars Command, General Linda Hayes reviewed the battle plans for the 100th time. She was a career military officer who had spent 30 years preparing for wars that never came. Humanity had been at peace for so long that most people forgot what real war looked like. Now she was planning the largest military operation in human history, and she knew that even with all their new weapons, the odds were terrible. The Krevthar had numbers on their side. Intelligence reports suggested they controlled over 500 star systems. Their empire stretched across a quarter of the galaxy. They had millions of ships and billions of soldiers. Even if humanity won every battle perfectly, they could not match that kind of industrial capacity. But Hayes was not planning to fight fairly. "Show me the supply routes again," she ordered. Her tactical officer brought up a holographic map showing the Krevthar fleet positions. The aliens were confident enough to leave their logistics vulnerable. They had supply ships carrying fuel and ammunition from their home systems to occupied Earth. Those ships were only lightly defended. Hayes smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "That's where we hit them first," she said. "Cut off their supplies, strand their occupation fleet, and watch them panic." Her officers began plotting attack vectors. The strategy was simple but brutal. Humanity could not win a straight fight, so they would not have a straight fight. They would use ambush tactics, false retreats, psychological warfare, and every dirty trick ever invented. The Krevthar wanted to see humans at their worst. Hayes intended to exceed their expectations. Dr. Helen Carter worked in a laboratory deep beneath the Martian surface. She had not seen sunlight in 2 months. Her team was developing something that made her sick to think about, but she kept working anyway. The project was a biological weapon specifically designed to target Krevthar physiology. "The protein markers are a perfect match," her assistant said, checking the data. "This virus will only affect them. It won't harm humans or any other species we've encountered." Helen looked at the sample under the microscope. The virus was elegant in its simplicity. It would enter a Krevthar's respiratory system and multiply rapidly, causing the alien's immune system to attack its own organs. Death would come within 72 hours, and it would be extremely painful. "How contagious is it?" Helen asked extremely. One infected Krevthar could spread it to thousands before showing symptoms. Helen closed her eyes. She had never imagined creating something like this. Before the war, she had protested weapon development, had written papers about the moral responsibility of scientists. Now she was designing plague vectors, but every time doubt crept in, she remembered the videos of Earth burning. She remembered children vaporized in the streets. She remembered that the Krevthar had shown zero mercy. "Mass produce it," she ordered. Prepare delivery systems for every ship in the fleet. Lieutenant Amy Brooks sat in a dark room filled with computer screens. She was an intelligence officer, and her job was to hack into Krevthar communication networks. It had taken weeks, but she had finally cracked their encryption. Now she could read their messages, listen to their conversations, and understand what they were saying about Earth. What she found made her blood boil. The Krevthar were bragging. Their officers sent messages home describing Earth as their greatest victory and humans as weak prey animals. They shared videos of the bombardment like entertainment. Some aliens had started collecting human skulls as trophies. They were taking bets on how long it would take to exterminate the remaining colonies. Amy recorded everything and sent it to Admiral Bennett. The Admiral needed to see this. Every human needed to see what they were fighting against. This was not an enemy that could be reasoned with or forgiven. This was an enemy that needed to be destroyed completely. She also found something useful. The Krevthar were not expecting a counterattack. Their sensors were focused outward toward the galactic rim, watching for threats from other empires. They had left their occupation fleet around Earth with minimal support, assuming broken humanity posed no danger. The aliens thought the war was already over. Amy smiled grimly. Surprise was a weapon, and humanity was about to use it. Training for the Reaper pilots was brutal. Jake Morrison flew combat simulations 18 hours a day. The scenarios were designed to be nearly impossible. 3 fighters against 20 enemy ships, navigation through asteroid fields while under fire, precision strikes on moving targets. Every simulation ended with most of the human pilots dead. Again, the instructor barked whenever a simulation ended. You died too fast again. Jake ran the scenarios until his hands shook from exhaustion. Other pilots collapsed at their stations and had to be carried to medical. 2 committed suicide, unable to handle the pressure, but those who survived became something more than human. They learned to think like weapons, to react without hesitation, to make split-second decisions that meant life or death. After 2 months of training, Jake could fly his Reaper through an asteroid field blindfolded. He could hit targets moving at relativistic speeds. He could fight 3 enemy ships simultaneously and win. The training had stripped away everything except the mission. He no longer thought about his family or his old life. There was only the enemy and the need to make them pay. Commander Paul Griffin's ship, the Valiant, underwent a complete refit. The old patrol cruiser's cargo holds were converted to missile bays. Her light armor was replaced with ablative plating. Additional reactors were installed to power new weapon systems. When the work was finished, the Valiant looked like a completely different ship. She was scarred and aggressive, built to hurt. Griffin's crew had changed too. They were quieter now, more focused. The young ensigns who used to joke around during shifts were silent. The older officers who used to talk about retirement only discussed tactics. Everyone understood that this voyage would likely be their last. "Sir, the weapon upgrades are complete," his tactical officer reported. "We're carrying enough firepower to level a small moon." "Good," Griffin replied. "We're going to need it." The Retribution fleet began assembling in orbit around Mars. Over 2,000 ships gathered in formation, each one modified for war. There were battleships bristling with railguns, destroyers carrying enough missiles to blot out stars, and carriers loaded with the new Reaper fighters. Every vessel had been built or converted in just 3 months through sheer determination and industrial effort that should have been impossible. Admiral Bennett stood on the bridge of his flagship, the EDS Retribution. The ship was the largest humanity had ever built, constructed from the frame of an old colony transport and armed with every weapon they could mount on her hull. She was ugly and asymmetric and absolutely lethal. "Status report," Bennett ordered. "All ships report ready," his XO replied. "Personnel are at stations. Weapons are armed. We're ready to launch Operation Hellstorm." Bennett looked at the tactical display showing Earth. The blue planet The Krevthar supply convoy moved through space without concern. 5 massive transport ships carried fuel, ammunition, and supplies for the occupation fleet around Earth. Only 2 destroyers guarded them. The Krevthar commander in charge of the convoy was confident. Human forces had been completely destroyed. There was no threat out here in the deep black between stars. He was wrong. The Retribution fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel, perfectly positioned around the convoy. The Krevthar barely had time to register what was happening before human weapons opened fire. Hundreds of missiles streaked across the void, targeting the two destroyers. Railgun rounds moving at significant fractions of light speed punched through alien armor like tissue paper. The first destroyer exploded before it could raise shields. The second managed to get defensive systems online but lasted only 30 seconds longer. Then the human ships turned their attention to the supply vessels. Those ships had no weapons and no chance. Within 5 minutes, the entire convoy was debris. Target destroyed, Commander Griffin reported from the Valiant's bridge. No survivors. Moving to next objective, Admiral Bennett acknowledged the report. Across the solar system, similar scenes were playing out. Human strike groups were hitting Krevthar logistics throughout occupied space. Supply depots, fuel stations, repair facilities, all were being systematically destroyed. The aliens had spread their forces thin, never expecting organized resistance. Now they were paying for that arrogance. Jake Morrison's Reaper Squadron struck a Krevthar communications relay near Jupiter. The installation was built into one of the gas giant's moons, protected by shields and point defense guns. The aliens thought the location made it invulnerable. They had not counted on the new technology humanity was using. All Reapers engage stealth systems, Jake ordered. His fighter's hull seemed to shimmer and vanish. The new cloaking technology bent light and sensor waves around the ship, making it invisible to Krevthar detection systems. It only worked at shorter ranges and used enormous amounts of power, but for a surprise attack it was perfect. The squadron glided silently toward the installation. The alien defenders never saw them coming. Jake locked onto the shield generator and fired his graviton disruptors. The weapon created a localized gravity field that pulled the shield emitter apart at the atomic level. The shields collapsed instantly. All fighters fire at will, Jake commanded. 200 Reapers dropped their stealth and unleashed hell. Plasma torpedoes turned the base's surface into molten slag. Missiles found ammunition storage and created secondary explosions that shattered the moon. Within 90 seconds, the communications relay was gone, and with it, the Krevthar's ability to coordinate forces in the outer solar system. Jake checked his squadron status. They had not lost a single fighter. The enemy had never gotten a shot off. Reform and move to Rally Point Beta, he ordered. We've got 4 more targets today. On Earth's surface, the human resistance got word that the counterattack had begun. Captain Roy Simpson led a group of 50 survivors hidden in what used to be the Rocky Mountains. They had been living underground, avoiding Krevthar patrols, slowly dying from starvation and despair. The news from Mars changed everything. They're coming back, Simpson told his people. The fleet is hitting the aliens everywhere. We need to do our part. His team had been planning an attack on a Krevthar processing center, where captured humans were being sorted and enslaved. It was heavily guarded, and any attack would likely be suicide. Before that had made them hesitate. Now it gave them purpose. We've got nothing to lose, Simpson said. If we're going to die, we die fighting. We die making them hurt. Who's with me? Every single person volunteered. They attacked at night when the Krevthar guard shifts changed. The aliens were confident, lazy even. Why worry about security when the enemy was already beaten? Simpson's team used improvised explosives made from mining equipment to blow holes in the perimeter fence. Then they rushed inside with whatever weapons they had managed to scavenge. The battle was vicious and close range. Simpson killed 3 Krevthar soldiers with a makeshift spear before finding a dropped alien weapon. The gun was heavy and awkward in his hands, but it fired bolts of energy that turned flesh to ash. He used it without mercy. Specialist Megan Torres, a former combat medic, led a group to the holding cells. Inside were hundreds of humans in various states of injury and exhaustion. The Krevthar had been experimenting on them, testing their endurance, seeing how much pain they could survive. Some prisoners were so broken they could not walk. Torres and her team carried them anyway. We're getting you out, she told them. Humanity's fighting back. We're not beaten. The escape was desperate and bloody. Half of Simpson's team died covering their retreat. But they got 200 prisoners out and disappeared into the ruined mountains. The Krevthar sent patrols after them, but the humans knew the terrain and the aliens did not. They vanished like ghosts, leaving only dead aliens behind. Word of the escape spread through the resistance networks. Other groups began their own attacks. They sabotaged alien equipment, destroyed supply caches, and ambushed patrol units. None of them had sophisticated weapons or training, but they had rage and desperation, and that was enough. The Krevthar occupation forces suddenly found themselves fighting a guerrilla war they were not prepared for. In space, the Retribution fleet continued its campaign. They never fought fair, never engaged when the enemy had an advantage. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. The Krevthar tried to predict their movements but failed. Human intelligence led by Lieutenant Amy Brooks was always one step ahead. Amy had complete access to Krevthar communications now. She could read their orders before their own ships received them. When the aliens planned an ambush, she knew about it hours in advance. When they moved reinforcements, she redirected human strike groups to hit the now undefended positions. The Krevthar were fighting blind while humanity saw everything. Their command structure is breaking down, Amy reported to Admiral Bennett. Local commanders are starting to act independently because they can't trust orders from higher up. They think we have spies in their fleet. Bennett smiled coldly. Let them think that. Paranoia is almost as useful as intelligence. The Admiral studied the tactical map. The Krevthar had lost a third of their logistics network in just 2 weeks. Their occupation fleet around Earth was running low on fuel and ammunition. Soon they would have to withdraw or starve. Status on the orbital assault? Bennett asked. Captain Simpson's team on the surface has identified the main Krevthar command station. His tactical officer replied. It's in geosynchronous orbit over what used to be Geneva. Heavily defended. Shields, point defense, and a battle group of 20 ships for protection. Can we take it? The officer hesitated. With acceptable losses, no, sir. It would cost us at least 200 ships. Bennett considered this. 200 ships was a significant portion of their fleet. But that command station coordinated all Krevthar operations on Earth. Without it, the occupation would collapse into chaos. Prepare the assault, he ordered. We're taking that station. Captain Roy Simpson received coded instructions from orbit. His mission was to plant a quantum beacon on Earth's surface directly beneath the Krevthar command station. The beacon would allow human ships to jump in at point-blank range, bypassing the station's long-range defenses. It was dangerous work that required getting close to heavily patrolled areas. Simpson gathered his best people. They had to cross 200 kilometers of hostile territory, plant the beacon without being detected, and get out alive. The chances were terrible. Why do we always get the suicide missions? One of his team joked weakly. Because we're good at not dying, Simpson replied. Let's keep that streak going. They moved at night through the ruins of European cities. The landscape was unrecognizable. Where Geneva once stood was now a crater surrounded by Krevthar fortifications. The aliens had built their base over human graves, which seemed fitting given their contempt for humanity. Simpson's team spent 3 days getting into position. They hid in rubble, moved through old sewage tunnels, and avoided countless alien patrols. Twice they had to kill Krevthar scouts silently to avoid raising alarms. Megan Torres proved especially skilled at this, using a blade she had made from scavenged metal. Finally, they reached the target zone. Simpson set up the quantum beacon and activated it. The device was small, about the size of a briefcase, but it created a resonance field that would guide human ships through faster than light space with perfect accuracy. Beacon active, Simpson reported via encrypted radio. You've got your targeting solution. Make it count. Acknowledged, Admiral Bennett's voice came back. Get clear. We jump in 30 minutes, Simpson's team ran. They did not try to be quiet anymore, just fast. Krevthar forces noticed them and gave chase. Plasma bolts scorched the ground around them. 2 of Simpson's people went down, killed before they could even scream. The rest kept running, knowing they could not stop, could not fight, could only try to survive. High above, the Retribution fleet prepared for the most dangerous assault yet. Admiral Bennett stood on his bridge watching the 6 months after Earth's liberation, the Retribution fleet pushed deep into Krevthar space. They had crossed into enemy territory weeks ago, and every jump brought them closer to the heart of the alien empire. The fleet was smaller now. Combat losses and the need to leave garrison forces behind had reduced their numbers to about 800 ships. But what remained was experienced, battle-hardened, and utterly ruthless. Commander Kate Phillips stood before a holographic display showing a Krevthar colony world. She was humanity's chief diplomatic officer, though her job had changed dramatically since the war began. Before, she had negotiated trade agreements and cultural exchanges. Now she delivered ultimatums. This is the human fleet to the government of Kelvar Prime, Kate broadcast toward the planet. You have allied yourselves with the Krevthar Dominion. You have provided them with resources and support. You have enabled their genocide of our people. We are giving you one chance. Surrender now. Provide us with intelligence on Krevthar fleet positions and we will spare your world. Refuse and we will treat you as enemy combatants." She paused, letting the message sink in. "You have 6 hours to decide. Choose wisely." The alien government on Kelvar Prime was terrified. They were a minor species that had been conquered by the Krevthar decades ago. They had no choice in supporting the Dominion. Now humans were at their doorstep demanding cooperation, and the reputation that preceded the human fleet was frightening. Stories had spread across the galaxy about what humanity did to its enemies. Planets that resisted were bombarded until nothing lived. Ships that fought were destroyed without mercy. Prisoners were rare because humans rarely left survivors. Some species whispered that the humans had become monsters, worse than the Krevthar had ever been. Kelvar Prime surrendered within 3 hours. "Smart choice," Kate told them coldly. "Now tell us everything you know about Krevthar military installations in this sector. And be thorough. If we find out you lied, we'll come back." The intelligence they received was valuable. The Krevthar had a supply depot 2 systems away, lightly defended and filled with ammunition. Admiral Bennett ordered an immediate attack. The depot was destroyed within an hour, another blow to the alien logistics network. Sergeant Victor Lee led ground forces on a different kind of mission. His unit was tasked with liberating a prison planet where the Krevthar kept slaves from dozens of conquered species. The planet's surface was a nightmare of labor camps and processing facilities. The Krevthar had no interest in treating their slaves humanely. They worked them until they died and then replaced them with new captives. Lee's Marines landed in drop pods, hitting the surface hard and fast. They wore powered armor that made them stronger and more durable than any Krevthar soldier. Their weapons were designed for maximum killing efficiency. As soon as they landed, they started shooting. "No Krevthar leaves alive," Lee ordered over the radio. "Free the prisoners and move to extraction points. We've got 30 minutes before enemy reinforcements arrive." The Marines moved through the camps like death itself. Krevthar guards tried to organize a defense but were cut down in seconds. Some aliens tried to surrender, but the humans were not interested. Every guard, every overseer, every Krevthar on the planet was killed. No exceptions. No mercy. One of Lee's Marines hesitated when he found a Krevthar medic. The alien was unarmed, clearly not a combat soldier, trying to help wounded guards. The Marine looked at the medic, thought about his orders, and pulled the trigger anyway. The medic died without understanding why mercy had become impossible. The freed prisoners were a mix of species, all of them malnourished and traumatized. Some had been slaves for years. They stared at the human soldiers with confusion and fear, not understanding what was happening. "You're free," Lee told them in a dozen translated languages. "The Krevthar who held you here are dead. We're taking you somewhere safe." One prisoner, a thin alien with 6 limbs, approached Lee cautiously. "You are humans? The ones who were attacked?" "Yeah," Lee replied. "That's us. We heard what you did to the Krevthar forces at Earth. We heard you showed no mercy." Lee looked at the alien, his expression hidden behind his helmet's visor. "That's right. We don't." "Good," the prisoner said quietly. "They deserve none." The Marines extracted over 10,000 slaves from that planet and left nothing but ruins behind. Every building was demolished. Every piece of equipment was destroyed. The Krevthar would find a graveyard when they returned. Dr. Helen Carter's biological weapons finally saw use. A Krevthar agricultural world called Thrace refused to surrender. They had a small defensive fleet and believed they could hold out against the human attack. Admiral Bennett decided to make an example of them. "Deploy the virus," he ordered. Helen had hoped it would not come to this, but she pressed the button anyway. Small stealth drones entered Thrace's atmosphere and released her creation. The virus spread quickly, carried by wind and water. Within days, every Krevthar on the planet was infected. The symptoms started with a cough. Then came the fever. Then the Krevthar's own immune systems turned against them, attacking organs and tissue. Death followed within 72 hours, just as Helen had designed. The planet's defenders died at their posts. Farmers died in their fields. Children died in their homes. The virus did not discriminate. When human forces finally landed on Thrace, they found a ghost world. Millions of Krevthar corpses littered the streets. The few survivors were so weak they could barely move. Human soldiers walked through the dead cities and felt nothing. This was what the Krevthar had done to Earth, only slower. "Document everything," Helen ordered her team. "I want complete records of the virus's effectiveness." She watched drones flying over the dead planet and tried to feel remorse. Part of her knew this was monstrous, that she had become something terrible. But the rest of her remembered Seattle burning, remembered Tokyo vaporized, remembered 3 billion dead. The Krevthar had started this. Humanity was just finishing it. Jake Morrison's Reaper Squadron continued racking up kills. They had destroyed over 300 enemy ships at this point. Jake himself had personally destroyed 47. He kept count, marking his cockpit with small tally marks. Other pilots did the same. It became a competition to see who could kill the most aliens. Contacts ahead, his sensor officer reported. Krevthar Battle Group. 10 warships. All Reapers attack formation, Jake ordered. No survivors. His squadron dove into combat with practiced efficiency. They had done this so many times it had become routine. Lock on target, fire graviton disruptor. Watch enemy ship tear apart, move to next target. Kill, kill, kill. The rhythm was almost meditative. One Krevthar destroyer tried to run. Jake pursued it, firing plasma torpedoes that scorched the fleeing ship's engines. The destroyer lost power and began to drift. Its captain sent a distress signal, begging for mercy, offering to surrender. Jake destroyed it anyway. His co-pilot, a young woman named Lisa Grant, watched the enemy ship explode. They were trying to surrender, she said quietly. Don't care, Jake replied. They don't get to surrender. They don't get to live. That's the deal, Lisa nodded slowly. She had lost her parents at Earth too. She understood. Mercy was something humanity used to have, back when they were civilized. Now they were just survivors doing whatever it took to win. The human fleet encountered other species as they pushed deeper into Krevthar space. Some were allies of the Dominion, others were neutral, trying to stay out of the conflict. Kate Phillips dealt with all of them the same way. Join us or get out of our way, she told them. Those are your only options. We're not here to negotiate. We're not here to make friends. We're here to destroy the Krevthar, and anyone who helps them is an enemy. Most species chose to stay neutral, declaring their space off limits to both sides. A few joined the human cause, seeing an opportunity to settle old scores with the Dominion. Those allies provided intelligence and supply bases, though they quickly learned that working with humans was unsettling. Your people have no restraint, one allied diplomat told Kate. You attack civilian targets. You use biological weapons. You refuse to take prisoners. This is not how wars are supposed to be fought. Kate looked at the alien with cold eyes. The Krevthar killed 3 billion of our civilians. They used weapons of mass destruction on our homeworld. They tried to exterminate our entire species. So excuse us if we're not following your rules of civilized warfare. But you are becoming like them, the diplomat protested. You are becoming monsters. Maybe, Kate replied. But we're monsters who are winning. Now, do you have anything useful to tell us, or are you just here to complain about our methods? The diplomat left without another word. Kate watched them go and felt nothing. She knew what humanity had become. She knew the line between justice and revenge had blurred into nothing. But she also knew that stopping now meant the Krevthar would regroup and attack again. The only way to be safe was to make sure the Dominion could never threaten anyone again. Commander Paul Griffin's ship, the Valiant, had been in continuous combat for 6 months. The destroyer was held together by patches and improvised repairs. Half her crew was gone, replaced by inexperienced recruits who learned war in the middle of battle. But the ship kept. The Retribution fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Drakthos system. Admiral Bennett stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display with cold determination. The Krevthar homeworld was visible in the center of the screen, surrounded by thousands of defensive platforms, orbital fortresses, and warships. This was the heart of the Dominion, the birthplace of the species that had tried to exterminate humanity. Sensor report, Bennett ordered. Counting 5,300 Krevthar warships, his tactical officer replied. Another 2,000 defense platforms. Planetary shields are active. Multiple ground-based weapon batteries. Sir, they're ready for us, Bennett nodded. The Krevthar had been preparing for this moment ever since human forces began their counter-offensive. They had pulled back their scattered fleets and concentrated everything here for a final stand. The numbers were overwhelming, nearly 7-1 against the humans. Standard military doctrine said attacking was suicide. Bennett had stopped caring about doctrine months ago. All ships, battle formation, he ordered. Prepare to advance. Launch all fighters. Across the human fleet, carrier bays opened and Reaper squadrons poured into space. Jake Morrison sat in his cockpit, checking his weapons one last time. This would be his last battle. Everyone knew it. The odds of surviving what came next were effectively zero. "All Reapers, this is Morrison," he said over the radio. "We've come a long way from Mars. We've killed thousands of these bastards. Today we finish the job. Today we end the Krevthar once and for all." He looked at the tactical display showing the massive enemy fleet. "It's been an honor flying with you all," Jake said quietly. "See you on the other side." The Reaper squadrons formed up and accelerated toward the enemy lines. Behind them, the capital ships followed, their weapons charging for the fight of their lives. The Krevthar opened fire first. Thousands of plasma beams and missiles streaked across the void. Human ships activated their defensive systems, shooting down incoming fire and dodging what they could not stop. But some attacks got through. A destroyer exploded, then a cruiser, then a carrier loaded with fighters. Within the first minute, humanity had lost 20 ships. "Return fire," Bennett ordered calmly. "All weapons free." The human fleet unleashed everything. Railguns fired metal slugs at relativistic speeds. Missiles flew in swarms. Plasma weapons turned the darkness into burning light. The graviton disruptors that had proven so effective tore enemy ships apart at the molecular level. But the Krevthar had adapted. Their newer vessels had shields specifically designed to counter human weapons. The battle became a grinding slugfest with both sides taking heavy casualties. Jake Morrison's squadron dove into the chaos, weaving between capital ships and dodging explosions. He locked onto a Krevthar cruiser and fired his remaining graviton disruptor. The weapon struck the cruiser's reactor, and the entire ship disintegrated in a chain reaction. "Target destroyed," Jake reported, already searching for the next enemy. Around him, Reapers were dying. He watched Lisa Grant's fighter take a direct hit and disappear in a flash of fire. No time to grieve. Just keep fighting. Keep killing. Dr. Helen Carter was not with the fleet. She remained on Mars, monitoring the battle through communications relays. Her biological weapons were loaded on several ships, ready to be deployed against the Krevthar homeworld if ordered. She prayed it would not come to that, but she knew it probably would. "The casualties are extreme," her assistant said, watching the data stream. "We've lost over 200 ships already." Helen closed her eyes. Each ship represented hundreds of lives, people she might have known. But if they lost here, the Krevthar would rebuild and come for Earth again. There was no choice. There had never been a choice. "Prepare the viral payload for deployment," she ordered. "If the Admiral calls for it, we need to be ready." Commander Paul Griffin's ship, the Valiant, pushed deep into enemy formation. The destroyer was on fire in 3 places and losing atmosphere, but Griffin kept fighting. His crew worked frantically to keep systems operational while returning fire at any Krevthar vessel in range. "Sir, we're being targeted by their flagship," his tactical officer shouted. Massive energy spike. "They're charging some kind of superweapon." Griffin looked at the enemy flagship on his display. It was an enormous vessel, easily 5 times the size of any human ship. If that weapon fired into the fleet, it would destroy dozens of vessels. "Helm full speed toward that flagship," Griffin ordered. "Navigation, give me a collision course." His crew understood immediately. "Sir, we can't survive a ramming attack." "I know," Griffin said calmly. "Evacuate all non-essential personnel to escape pods. Everyone else, stay at your posts. We're going to take that flagship with us." The Valiant accelerated, pushing her damaged engines past their limits. The Krevthar flagship tried to target the approaching destroyer, but Griffin's ship was moving too fast and erratically. Railgun rounds hammered the Valiant's armor, tearing away sections of hull, but she kept coming. 10 seconds to impact, the helmsman reported. Griffin opened a fleet-wide channel. "This is Commander Griffin. It's been an honor serving with you all. Give them hell." The Valiant struck the Krevthar flagship at maximum speed. The kinetic energy of the impact was catastrophic. Both ships exploded in a fireball that lit up the entire battlefield. The flagship's superweapon detonated before it could fire, creating a secondary explosion that destroyed 6 nearby Krevthar vessels. Admiral Bennett watched the explosion and felt a momentary grief for Griffin and his crew. Good people. Brave people. But there was no time to mourn. The battle raged on. "Sir, the Krevthar Empress is hailing us," his communications officer reported. "She wants to negotiate." Bennett almost laughed. "Put her through." The Krevthar Empress appeared on screen. She was ancient by their standards, her carapace scarred from long years of rule. Despite the desperation of her situation, she maintained a regal bearing. "Human Admiral," she said, "enough blood has been spilled. Both our species have suffered terribly. I am prepared to discuss surrender terms." "Terms?" Bennett repeated. "You're in no position to demand terms." "I am offering to end Krevthar aggression," the Empress continued. "We will withdraw from all occupied territories. We will pay reparations. We will even submit to monitoring by human forces. But you must stop this attack. You must spare my people." Bennett leaned back in his chair, studying the alien leader. She was afraid, trying not to show it, but failing. Her empire was crumbling around her, and she knew it. "Where was this mercy when you burned Earth?" Bennett asked coldly. "Where were these offers of peace when you murdered 3 billion humans? You didn't give us a chance to surrender. You just started killing." "That was a mistake," the Empress admitted. "We underestimated your species. We thought you were weak, that you would be easy to conquer. We were wrong." "Yeah, you were," Bennett said. "And now you want mercy. You want us to show you the compassion you refused to show us. My civilians had nothing to do with the attack on Earth," the Empress pleaded. "They are innocent. Please, Admiral, do not punish them for our military's crimes." Bennett was silent for a long moment. He thought about his own family, lost when the Krevthar attacked. He thought about the 3 billion dead. He thought about every human who had suffered because of Krevthar arrogance. "Your civilians," he said slowly, "will have exactly 48 hours to evacuate this system. Anyone who remains after that will be considered an enemy combatant. We're going to destroy Drakthos and everything in this system. We're going to make sure the Krevthar Dominion never threatens anyone again." The Empress stared at him in horror. "You cannot be serious." "Billions live here. Destroying our star system will kill most of them. They cannot all evacuate in 48 hours. You should have thought of that before attacking Earth," Bennett replied. "You wanted total war. This is what it looks like. You are monsters," the Empress whispered. "No," Bennett said. "We're survivors, and we're making sure you never forget what happens when you try to exterminate humanity." He cut the transmission and turned to his weapons officer. "Deploy the stellar converter. Target Drakthos star." The stellar converter was humanity's ultimate weapon, developed in secret during the months after Earth's fall. It was a device that could destabilize a star's fusion processes, causing it to go supernova prematurely. Dr. Helen Carter had helped design it, along with several other scientists who understood that conventional weapons might not be enough. The device was loaded onto a stealth ship and sent toward Drakthos star. It would take 24 hours to reach position, and another 24 to activate. That gave the Krevthar their 48-hour warning. Not enough time to save everyone, but more mercy than they had shown Earth. The battle continued while the stellar converter moved into position. The Krevthar fought with desperation now, knowing they were fighting for the survival of their entire species. Ships rammed human vessels when they ran out of ammunition. Soldiers activated suicide explosives rather than be captured. The aliens were discovering what humans already knew. When facing extinction, there are no limits to what you will do. Jake Morrison's Reaper Squadron was down to 12 fighters from the original 200. Jake himself was flying on backup power, his ship.